Karen Westfield's voice was confident and dismissive. Next. Your grandfather understood that having neighbors was beneficial for everyone. We maintained the shoreline, keep the water clean, and he didn't have to worry about trespassers or liability. Like 8 years of trespassing could erase what the survey had just proven. Like $380,000 in docks and beaches built without permission could override 4,000 acres of continuous family ownership. What she didn't know was that I had the email where the developer told her they'd never secured an easement and to keep quiet and act like you own it. This wasn't a boundary dispute or informal agreement. 4,000 acres, a 2-mile private lake, an HOA president who'd built 12 docks, 3 beaches, and a clubhouse deck on my property without surveying, without asking permission, and refused to remove them when caught. Karen made the mistake every HOA president makes, assuming that 8 years of open use gave her rights to someone else's property and that community investment justified ignoring ownership. It alone. Over 9 months, I watched Karen Westfield discover what happens when you build $380,000 in structures without spending $500 on a survey. Instruct your board to play dumb when questioned and claim adverse possession in a state, requiring 10 years when you only have 8. This is the story of how an HOA president lost her position, her home, and cost her community $575,000 because she couldn't answer one question the judge asked. Did you ever ask William Cassidy for permission before building docks on his land? Not because I wanted to destroy her. Because property law doesn't care how much you spent or how long you've been there. It cares who owns the land. And what happens when you build on property that was never yours. But let me start from the beginning. Before we dive into, I'd love to know where you're listening from today. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons for more interesting stories, just like this. My grandfather died on March 14th at 89 years old, leaving behind a 4,000-acre ranch in East Texas that had been in our family since 1952. His name was William Cassidy. Everyone called him Billand. He'd spent 70 years working that land, cattle ranching in his younger days, then timber leases and hunting rights as he got older. He'd built the original ranch house himself in 1954, a modest 2-bedroom structure, overlooking a 2-mile private lake that sat in the center of the property, like a sapphire surrounded by pine forest and rolling pasture. I was his only grandchild. My father had passed away when I was 12, and my mother had died 3 years before my grandfather. There were no other heirs, no siblings, no cousins. The ranch, all 4,000 acres, was mine. I received the call from the estate attorney on March 16th. The will was simple and clear. The property, the lake, the mineral rights. The timber contracts, everything transferred to me. I'd visited the ranch only a handful of times as a kid. My grandfather was a quiet, private man who preferred solitude to company. After my father died, the visits stopped. I'd spoken to my grandfather maybe twice a year by phone, brief conversations about weather and cattle prices. I knew he owned a large piece of land. Didn't realize how large until I saw the survey map for 017 acres. A 2-mile lake. Timber stands worth an estimated $600,000. Hunting leases generating $25,000 a year. I was 34 years old, working as a project manager in Dallas, and I'd just inherited a small kingdom. I drove out to the ranch on April 2nd, a Saturday, taking Highway 59 northeast out of Houston and then winding through back roads into the pine forests of East Texas. The GPS led me to a county road I didn't recognize, then to a gravel drive marked by a weathered wooden sign, Cassidy Ranch. Private property. I turned onto the drive and followed it through dense forest for nearly a mile. The road curved, opened into a clearing, and then I saw it. A gate. A massive wrought iron gate, 10 feet tall, painted black, flanked by stone pillars and a guard booth. Beyond the gate, I could see neat rows of homes, modern, expensive 2-story houses with manicured lawns and decorative mailboxes. I stopped the truck and stared. This wasn't part of my grandfather's property. This was a subdivision. A sign next to the gate read, Lakeview Estates, a gated community. I pulled up to the guard booth. A man in a security uniform stepped out, holding a clipboard. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm looking for the Cassidy Ranch," I said. "This road should lead to it." The guard nodded. "You'll need to go around. This is Lakeview Estates. Private community. The old ranch property is on the other side of the lake." "Round where?" "Back to the county road. Head north about 2 miles. Look for the dirt turnoff near the old fence line. That'll take you to the ranch house." Truck around, my mind racing. A gated community. On my grandfather's land? Or next to it? I found the dirt turnoff 20 minutes later, a narrow, overgrown path cutting through the trees. I followed it for half a mile until I reached the ranch house, a small, faded structure with a sagging porch and peeling paint. Sitting on a low hill overlooking the lake stretched out below, wide and blue, bordered by pine trees and open grassland. It was beautiful, quiet, untouched, except for the southeast shore. I grabbed a pair of binoculars from the truck and walked to the edge of the hill. Through the binoculars, I could see the gated community I'd just passed. Rows of houses lining the lake shore, each with a backyard that sloped down to the water, and on the water itself, docks. At least a dozen of them, jutting out into the lake, some with boats tied up, others with covered lifts and jet skis. On the shore, cleared beaches with lounge chairs, fire pits, and stone pathways. A large clubhouse-style deck overlooking the water. People were swimming. Kids were playing on a floating platform. A pontoon boat was cruising near the western edge of the lake. I lowered the binoculars and pulled out the survey map the estate attorney had sent me. The map was clear. The lake was entirely on my property. The boundary line ran along the top of the ridge on the southeast side, about 200 yards inland from the water, which meant the gated community. Lakeview Estates was outside my property line, but the docks, the beaches, the clubhouse deck, those were on my land. I spent the next 2 hours walking the property. Following the boundary markers the surveyor had flagged years earlier. The southeast ridge was marked clearly, rusted metal stakes every 100 yards, each one spray-painted with Cassidy Private. The gated community sat just beyond the ridge. But everything below the ridge, the entire shoreline, the docks, the beaches, was on my side of the line. I stood at the edge of one of the cleared beaches, staring at the lounge chairs, the stone fire pit, the wooden dock stretching 50 feet into the water. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. Someone had built all of this on my land. I was walking back toward the ranch house when I heard a voice behind me. "Excuse me? Can I help you?" I turned. A woman in her mid-50s was walking toward me, dressed in white capris and a blue blouse. Holding a clipboard, she had short blonde hair, a tight smile, and the confident posture of someone used to being in charge. "I'm the property owner," I said. Her smile didn't waver. "I'm Karen Westfield, president of the Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association. I don't think we've met. I just inherited the ranch," I said. "From my grandfather, Bill Cassidy."
"Oh."
Karen's expression shifted, slightly surprised, then something else. Calculation. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Your grandfather was a wonderful man. Did you know him?" "We spoke a few times over the years," Karen said smoothly. "He was very kind to our community." "Kind how?" Karen gestured toward the lake. "He allowed us to use the lake. Shared access. It's been an arrangement for years." I looked at her carefully. "Shared access." "Yes. Your grandfather understood that having neighbors was beneficial for everyone. He maintained the shoreline, keep the water clean, and he didn't have to worry about trespassers or liability. Do you have that in writing?" Karen's smile tightened. "It was an understanding. Your grandfather was a man of his word. So no written easement. No recorded agreement." "It didn't need to be formal," Karen said. "It was a gentleman's agreement." I nodded slowly. "Show me the deed. Show me the easement." Karen's tone shifted, losing some of its warmth. "I don't think that's necessary. The arrangement has worked for nearly a decade. Our residents have invested significantly in the amenities. You see here docks, beaches, landscaping. We're not interested in disrupting that. Not interested in continuing an arrangement I never agreed to." Karen's smile disappeared entirely. "Your grandfather had an understanding with us. suggest. You honor that. My grandfather didn't own this property anymore, I said. I do, and I didn't give you permission to build docks on my land. Karen's eyes narrowed. If you interfere with our established use of this lake, you'll be facing a legal battle you can't win. We've been using this lake openly for 8 years. That creates rights. What kind of rights? Adverse possession, prescriptive easement. Take your pick. I stared at her. You're telling me you think you own my lake because you've been trespassing on it for 8 years? I'm telling you we've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars into infrastructure based on your grandfather's agreement. You can't just tear that down. Watch me. Karen's jaw tightened. She pulled a business card from her pocket and handed it to me. I suggest you call our attorney before you do something you'll regret. We're not going anywhere. She turned and walked back toward the gated community, her posture stiff with anger. I stood there, holding her card, looking out at the lake, my lake covered in docks and boats and floating. Platforms built by people who thought 8 years of trespassing gave them the right to stay. Karen, Westfield thought my grandfather had given her permission. She was wrong. And she was about to find out just how wrong. Because this wasn't her lake. It was mine. All. Now, 4,000 acres. And I was taking it back. I was back in Dallas by Monday morning, sitting in the office of Robert Hayes, a property attorney who'd been practicing Texas real estate law for over 30 years. His office was in a mid-rise building downtown, filled with shelves of legal volumes and framed survey maps of disputed boundary cases he'd won. Hayes was in his early 60s, gray-haired, calm, and methodical. He'd come recommended by the estate attorney who'd handled my grandfather's will. I spread the survey map across his desk and explained the situation. 4,000 acres, private lake, a gated community that had built docks and beaches on my property without permission. Hayes listened, taking notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking questions. Did your grandfather ever grant an easement? He asked. Not that I know of. The HOA president claims there was an understanding. Verbal agreement? She didn't even claim that. Just said my grandfather allowed them to use the lake. Hayes made another note. How long have they been using it? She said. 8 years. Hayes looked up. 8 years. In Texas, adverse possession requires 10 years of continuous, open, and hostile use. They're 2 years short. That's what I thought. But she threatened me with a lawsuit if I interfere. Hayes leaned back in his chair. Let me do a title search. If there's no recorded easement, no prescriptive right, and no adverse possession claim, then they're trespassing. You have every right to remove them. How long will the title search take? A week? Maybe less. Do it, I said. Hayes called me 6 days later. Title's clean, he said. No easements. No recorded agreements. No liens. No encumbrances. What? You own all 4,017 acres free and clear, including the lake and shoreline. So the HOA has no legal claim. None. They're trespassing. What about the understanding the president mentioned? Doesn't matter. Oral agreements for property rights have to be recorded to be enforceable under Texas law. If your grandfather verbally agreed to let them use the lake hand, I doubt he did. It's not binding on you as the new owner. What do I do next? We send a cease and desist letter. It's demand removal of all structures within 60 days. If they refuse, we file for trespass and an injunction. Do it. Hayes paused. One more thing. I pulled the deed history for the subdivision Lakeview Estates. It was developed by a company called Ridgeline Properties, starting in 2016. I looked at their sales materials from that time. They advertised exclusive lake access as a premium feature, but they didn't own the lake, correct? They sold homes. Based on access to your property, that's fraud. I felt a cold anger settle in my chest. So they lied to the homeowners. It appears so. The HOA has been operating under the assumption that the access was legitimate. Send the letter, I said. The CI sent us this letter went out on April 18th. Certified mail, addressed to Karen Westfield and the Lakeview Estates HOA board. It was 2 pages long, direct and unambiguous. Demand for removal of unauthorized structures. You are hereby notified that you are trespassing on private property. All docks, beaches, pathways, and recreational structures on the Cassidy Ranch property must be removed within 60 days. Failure to comply will result in legal action, including claims for trespass, damages, and attorney's fees. I didn't hear back from Karen instead. I received a letter from her attorney, a man named David Brennan, with a firm in Tyler, Texas. The letter was 4 pages long and dripping with condescension. Lake Access Disputer Mr. Cassidy, our client, the Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association, has been granted shared access to the lake adjacent to your property for the past 8 years. This access was established with the knowledge and consent of the prior property owner, William Cassidy. The HOA has made substantial investments in infrastructure to maintain and improve the lake, including docks, beaches, and recreational facilities. These improvements have enhanced the value of both the HOA properties and your own. Your demand for removal of these structures is unreasonable, it's unwarranted, and legally untenable. Texas law recognizes adverse possession and prescriptive easement rights when use of property is open, continuous, and notorious for a statutory period. Our client demands that you execute a permanent easement granting the HOA continued lake access. Failure to do so will result in litigation to establish prescriptive rights. We expect your response within 30 days. I forwarded the letter to Hayes. He called me 15 minutes later. This is a bluff. They're 2 years short of adverse possession, and they know it. So what do? Ignore it. Let them sue. When they do, we'll destroy them in court. But Karen wasn't relying on her attorney alone. On April 25th, I got a call from my friend Ed, who'd been helping me clean up the ranch house on weekends. You seen the Facebook post? Ed asked. What Facebook post? Check the Lakeview Estates HOA page. I pulled it up on my phone. The post was from Karen Westfield, posted 3 hours earlier. With over 200 comments and 150 shares. Greedy heir wants to steal our lake for the past 8 years. Our community has enjoyed access to the beautiful lake that borders Lakeview Estates. This access was granted by the previous landowner, who understood the value of being a good neighbor now. A new owner has inherited the property and is demanding we remove all of our docks, beaches, and facility structures we built and maintained at great expense to our community. We have invested nearly $1 million into lake infrastructure. Our families swim there. Our children play there. And now one man wants to take it all away, not because it harms him, but because he can. This is not about property rights. This is about greed. If you believe in community, fairness, and standing up to bullies, please sign our petition demanding that the new landowner honor the agreement his grandfather made with us. The post included a link to an online petition titled. I clicked the link. The petition had 487 signatures. The comments on the Facebook post were vicious. This guy inherited 4,000 acres and he's mad we use one lake. What a selfish jerk. He doesn't even live here. He just wants to profit off land he didn't earn. Should sue him for everything. He can't just steal our access. Oh, someone should make his life hell until he backs down. I stared at the screen. Anger and disbelief mixing in equal measure. Karen had turned this into a public relations war. 2 days later, the local TV station ran a story. The segment was titled, Lake Access Dispute Divides Community. The reporter interviewed Karen Westfield in front of the lake. With the docks and beaches visible in the background, reporter Ms. Westfield, can you explain what's happening here? Karen, for 8 years, the residents of Lakeview Estates have had access to this beautiful lake. The previous owner welcomed us. He understood that sharing the lake benefited everyone. Reporter, and now, Karen, now a new owner has inherited the property and wants to shut us out. He's demanding we tear down docks, beaches, and facilities that we built with our own money. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars in investments. Reporter, what does the new owner say? Karen, he says he owns the lake and we have no right to use it. But we've been here for 8 years. Our families depend on this access. He's trying to take away something that was freely given to us. The segment ended with a shot of families swimming in the lake, children playing on the floating platform, the reporter's voiceover. The dispute is headed to court, where a judge will decide whether history and community investment outweigh strict property rights. I turned off the TV. Karen was good. She'd framed this as a fight between a heartless outsider and a community of families. She'd made me the villain. On May 2nd, I received a detailed survey report from Hayes. The surveyor had walked the entire boundary, photographed every structure, and estimated the value of the improvements the HOA had built on my land. Total structures: 12 boat docks, ranging from 30 to 60 feet in length, 3 cleared swimming beaches with stone fire pits, lounge chairs, and landscaping, 1 large clubhouse deck, 800 square feet, covered with picnic tables and lighting, multiple stone pathways, railings, and floating swim platforms. Estimated total value: $380,000. Hayes attached a note. This is going to be expensive for them to remove, but that's not your problem. They built on your land without permission. You have every right to demand removal. I sat at my kitchen table in Dallas, staring at the photos of the docks, the beaches, the clubhouse deck. Karen Westfield had called me greedy. She'd rallied 500 people to sign a petition against me. She'd gone on the news and painted me as a bully, trying to destroy a community. But the truth was simple. She'd been trespassing on my land for 8 years. She'd built $380,000 worth of structures without asking permission. She'd convinced an entire community that they had rights to a lake they didn't own. And now she was threatening to sue me for trying to take back what was mine. Karen thought 8 years of trespassing gave her rights. She thought public pressure would force me to back down. She was wrong, because this wasn't her lake, it was mine. And I was done negotiating. The lawsuit was coming, and Karen Westfield was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her life. You can't build on land you don't own, and if you try, you're going to pay to tear it down. The 60-day deadline came and went. Hayes had sent the cease and desist on April 18th, giving the HOA until June 17th to remove all structures from my property. On June 18th, I drove back out to the ranch. The docks were still there. The beaches were still cleared and maintained. Clubhouse deck was still standing. Nothing had been touched. I called Hayes from the truck. They ignored it. I'm not surprised, Hayes said. They're betting you won't follow through. Or that. You'll settle. What's next? We file a lawsuit. Trespass, removal, damages, and we ask for an injunction to stop any further use of the property while the case is pending. Do it. On June 20th, the Lakeview Estates HOA held an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, but Ed had a friend who lived in the community and attended. He sent me a summary later that night. The meeting was packed, over 180 residents in attendance, standing room only in the clubhouse. Karen Westfield stood at the front, flanked by the HOA board and their attorney, David Brennan. Karen opened by reading my cease and desist letter aloud, pausing for effect after the line demanding removal within 60 days. This man, Karen said, pointing at a printed photo of me she'd taped to a poster board, wants to destroy everything we've built. He wants to tear down our docks. He wants to close our beaches. He wants to take away the lake access that was promised to every family. In this community, the crowd murmured angrily. David Brennan stood and addressed the room. Legally speaking, the new owner's claim is weak. Under Texas law, we have a strong case for adverse possession. We've been using this lake openly, continuously, and without objection for 8 years. Statute requires 10 years, but courts have discretion when substantial investments have been made in good faith. That wasn't true. Adverse possession in Texas requires exactly 10 years, no exceptions, no judicial discretion. But the crowd believed him. Karen called for a vote, all in favor of defending our lake access rights and ignoring the removal demand. The vote was overwhelming, 173 in favor, 7 opposed. The HOA was officially refusing to comply. 3 days later, I received a letter from a different law firm, this one out of Houston, representing Ridgeline Properties, the developer that had built Lakeview Estates. The letter was aggressive and threatening. Tortious interference with contractor Mr. Cassidy, our client, Ridgeline Properties, LLC, has been made aware of your interference with the residential community known as Lakeview Estates. Your demands to remove lake access amenities constitute tortious interference with existing sales contracts and marketing agreements. Ridgeline Properties sold homes in Lakeview Estates based on representations that buyers would have access to the adjacent lake. Your actions threaten the value of those properties and expose our client to potential liability if you proceed with litigation or removal efforts. Ridgeline Properties will file a countersuit seeking damages for interference with business relationships, diminished property values, and reputational harm. We strongly advise you to reconsider your position. I forwarded the letter to Hayes. They're panicking, Hayes said. Ridgeline sold homes based on access they never secured. Now they're trying to intimidate you into backing down so they don't get sued by their own buyers. Can they sue me for tortious interference? They can try. They'll lose. You're the property owner. You have every right to control your land. Their failure to secure an easement is their problem, not yours. So we ignore this too? We respond politely, and we put them on notice that if they continue making false claims about lake access, we'll add them as defendants in the lawsuit. Hayes drafted the response. It was one page, professional and ice cold. Ridgeline Properties has no legal interest in the Cassidy Ranch property. Any representations made to buyers regarding lake access were unauthorized and fraudulent. We advise your client to cease all marketing claims related to the property and to notify buyers that no easement exists. On June 28th, Karen Westfield organized a rally. It was held at the Lakeview Estates Clubhouse on a Saturday afternoon. Time to maximize attendance and media coverage. Over 300 people showed up, residents from Lakeview Estates, neighboring communities, local business owners, even a few county officials. A local news crew was there. So was a reporter from the regional paper. Karen stood on a stage in front of the clubhouse, holding a microphone, with a massive banner behind her that read, "Save Our Lake." "Thank you all for coming," Karen began, her voice amplified across the crowd. "We're here today because one man, one person who inherited land he didn't work for, wants to take away something that belongs to all of us." The crowd booed. "For 8 years, our families have used this lake. Our children have learned to swim here. We've celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, 4th of July parties. This lake is part of our community, and now this man wants to fence it off and keep it for himself." More boos. Someone shouted, "Selfish," Karen continued, her tone rising. "We've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars, our money, our labor, our time to building docks, maintaining beaches, and keeping this lake safe and clean. And now he wants us to tear it all down, not because it's hurting him, not because we've done anything wrong, but because he can." A woman in the crowd yelled, "He's destroying families." Karen nodded. "That's exactly what he's doing. He's tearing apart a community, and we're not going to let him." The crowd erupted in applause. The news crew filmed the whole thing that night. The segment aired on the local station. Community fights to save lake access. The reporter interviewed Karen, several residents, and even a few kids who talked about how much they loved swimming in the lake. The segment ended with Karen's closing line, "We'll see him in court, and we're going to win." On July 1st, I returned to the ranch with Ed and a contractor. We brought 50 metal signs, each one reading, "No trespassing private property violators will be PROSECU 2. We spent the afternoon posting them along the boundary line, at every access point to the lake, and near every dock and beach the HOA had built. It took 6 hours. By the time we finished, the signs were visible from every angle. I took photos of each one, documenting the date and location the next morning. I drove back out to check on them. Every single sign was gone, all 50 of them torn down, ripped, out of the ground, thrown into the woods, or tossed into the lake. I called Hayes. "They tore down every sign. Document it. Take photos. That's destruction of property and willful trespass. It strengthens our case." I walked the boundary line, photographing the empty post holes, the torn metal stakes, the signs floating in the water. One sign had been spray painted with the words, "Your land. Prove IT." I took a close-up photo of that one. That afternoon, I received an email from Karen Westfield. The subject line read, "Final warning." The message was short. "Mr. Cassidy, Your attempt to intimidate our community with threatening signs has failed. We are not leaving. We are not backing down. We have every legal right to this lake, and we will fight you in court for as long as it takes. You have made a powerful enemy. You will lose this fight. And when you do, you'll wish you'd taken our offer to settle. We'll see you in court.
You're
Going to lose. Karen Westfield, President. Lakeview Estates HOA forwarded the email to Hayes without comment. On July 8th, Ed called me. You need to see this. He sent me a link to a real estate listing. It was for a home in Lakeview Estates, a newly constructed house on the southeast edge of the community, listed at $485,000. The listing description read, "Stunning 3-bedroom home in prestigious Lakeview Estates. Enjoy exclusive lake access with private docks, sandy beaches, and recreational facilities. It's perfect for families who love water sports and outdoor living." The photos showed the house, the backyard, and zoomed out in the background, the docks and beaches built on my property. One photo was taken from the water, showing the clubhouse deck and the Lakeview Estates homes in the distance. The caption read, "Your private lakefront paradise awaits." I stared at the screen, my jaw tight. They were still selling homes, still advertising lake access, still using photos of my property, even after the cease and desist, even after the lawsuit threat, even after I'd made it crystal clear that they had no rights to the lake. Ridgeline Properties and the HOA were still lying to buyers. I called Hayes. They're selling homes with exclusive lake access in the listing. Using photos of my property. Hayes was silent for a moment. Then forward me the link. We're adding Ridgeline as a defendant, and we're asking for fraud damages. How much? As much as we can prove. If they've been selling homes with false access claims, every buyer has been defrauded. And you've been damaged by the trespass and the loss of control over your land. File it, I said. Karen Westfield thought she could rally a community, launch a media campaign, and intimidate me into giving up. Ridgeline Properties thought they could keep selling homes based on access they never owned. The HOA thought 8 years of trespassing gave them the right to stay. They were all wrong, because the lake wasn't theirs. The land wasn't theirs, and no amount of public pressure, media coverage, or legal threats was going to change that. The lawsuit was filed on July 12th. Cassidy v. Lakeview Estates, HOA, and Ridgeline Properties, LLC claims trespass, fraud, unjust enrichment, demand for removal of all structures. Damages. Karen had promised a fight. She was about to get one, and she was going to lose. The lawsuit was filed on July 12th in the District Court of Cherokee County, Texas. Cassidy v. Lakeview Estates, HOA, and Ridgeline Properties, LLC claims trespass, removal of unauthorized structures, fraud, unjust enrichment, damages for lost use of property, and attorney's fees. Hayes had structured the complaint carefully. The HOA was named as the primary defendant for trespassing and building structures without permission. Ridgeline Properties was added for fraud specifically. For selling homes with representations of lake access they never legally secured. The complaint was 32 pages long. Supported by the survey report, boundary maps, photographs of every dock and beach, the title search showing no easements, and copies of Ridgeline's marketing materials advertising exclusive lake access. Karen's attorney, David Brennan, filed. A response 3 weeks later was predictable. Denial of trespass, assertion of adverse possession rights, claimed that my grandfather had granted oral permission, and a counterclaim alleging I was acting in bad faith to extort money from the community. Hayes read the response and laughed. They're drowning, and they know it. This is a Hail Mary. What's next? I asked. Discovery. We get to see their emails, their board meeting minutes, their communications with Ridgeline, and we depose Karen, the board members, and the developers. CEO, how long does that take? 3 to 4 months, but it's going to be worth it. If they've been lying, and I think they have, we'll find the proof. Discovery began in August. Hayes filed broad requests. All emails and communications between the HOA and Ridgeline Properties. All board meeting minutes from 2016 to present. All marketing materials related to lake access. and all financial records showing expenditures on lake infrastructure. The HOA resisted. Brennan filed objections, claiming the requests were overly broad and burdensome. The judge overruled him. This is a property dispute. The plaintiff has a right to know what the defendants knew, when they knew it, and what they told their members. And buyers produced the documents. The first batch of documents arrived in mid-September, over 2,000 pages of emails, meeting minutes, and financial records. Hayes and I spent 2 days going through them in his office, spreading printouts across the conference table, flagging anything relevant. And then we found it. Email number 1, June 14, 2017, from Michael Torrance, CEO, Ridgeline Properties 2, Karen Westfield. Subject: Lake access question. Karen: Quick question. One of our buyers asked if we have a recorded easement for the lake access. I told them we were working on finalizing it with the landowner just between us. We never actually secured an easement from the old man. He was sick and didn't respond to outreach. We went ahead with the development based on the assumption we could work it out later. For now, just keep quiet and act like you own it. As long as no one asks questions, we're fine. If the old man passes, the estate might not even know the lake exists. Mackay stared at the email, reading it 3 times to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. Hayes sat back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. That's it! That's the smoking gun. He admitted they never had an easement, and he told Karen to act like you own it and keep quiet. It's fraud. Conspiracy. This is exactly what we need. Email number 2, March 22, 2019, from Karen Westfield 2, Lakeview Estates Board of Directors. Subject: Lake Ownership Question Board. FYI, 1 of our newer residents asked about the legal status of our lake access. I told him it was secured through an agreement with the previous landowner. Heads up. The old man passed away last year, and the property has been inherited by a grandson who lives out of state. He might not know what his grandfather agreed to. Regarding our access, if he ever shows up and asks questions, play dumb. Say we've always had access and it's been an established arrangement for years. Don't volunteer anything about easements or legal agreements. Hopefully he never cares enough to look into it. Karen Hayes highlighted the email and added it to the evidence folder. She knew there was no agreement, and she told the board to lie about it. Is that actionable? Absolutely. It's evidence of bad faith. She knew they were trespassing, and she instructed the board to cover it up. We found more. Meeting minutes from an HOA board session in August 2016 showed a discussion about formalizing lake access with the adjacent landowner. The minutes noted: President Westfield to reach out to Mr. Cassidy regarding lake use agreement, but there was no follow-up, no record of contact, no agreement. Instead, the next meeting, minutes October 2016, showed the board voting to allocate $60,000 for lake amenity construction, including docks and beaches they'd voted to build before securing permission. Depositions began in October. Hayes deposed 5 people: Karen Westfield, 2 HOA board members, Michael Torrance, Ridgeline CEO, and a longtime Lakeview Estates resident who'd been involved in the initial development. I sat in on Karen's deposition. It was held in a conference room at Brennan's law office in Tyler. Texas windowless, sterile. The court reporter sitting at the end of the table, Karen arrived, dressed in business attire, confident and poised. She sat across from Hayes' hands. Folded on the table, Hayes started with easy questions: her role as HOA president, how long she'd held the position, her responsibilities. Then he shifted. Hayes: Miss Westfield, when did the HOA begin using the lake? Karen: Around 2016. Shortly after the community was established. Hayes: And did you obtain permission from the property owner before using the lake? Karen hesitated. We were told by the developer that access was included. Hayes: That's not. What? I asked. Did you personally contact the property owner William Cassidy before the HOA began using the lake? Karen: No. Hayes: Did anyone from the HOA contact him? Karen: Not that I'm aware of. Hayes: So the HOA began using the lake without asking the owner's permission? Karen: We assumed access was included. The developer told us. Hayes: You assumed? Karen's jaw tightened. Yes. Hayes slid a copy of the June 2017 email across the table. Do you recognize this email? Read it, her face paling slightly. Yes. Hayes. This is an email from Michael Torrance, CEO of Ridgeline Properties, sent to you in June 2017. In it, he states, "We never actually secured an easement from the old man. He then tells you to keep quiet and act like you own it. Did you follow that instruction?" Karen glanced at her attorney. Brennan leaned forward. "Don't answer that." "Privilege." Hayes smiled. "There's no privilege here, Mr. Brennan. Ms. Westfield isn't Ridgeline's client. She can't invoke their privilege." The court reporter waited. Karen finally answered. "I didn't see it as my responsibility to challenge the developer," he told us. "Access was part of the deal." Hayes, so you chose to believe the developer rather than confirm ownership yourself? Hayes slid another document across the table, the March 2019 email. Hayes. This is an email you sent to the HOA board in 2019. You tell them the property has been inherited by a grandson. And you instruct them to play dumb if he asks questions. Why did you send that email? Karen's voice was tight. I was trying to protect the community's investment, Hayes, by lying.
Oh.
We weren't lying. We had access for years, Hayes. Access you never obtained permission for. Access you knew was based on a false representation by the developer. And when the new owner inherited the property, you instructed your board to cover it up. Karen didn't answer. Michael. Torrance's deposition was worse. Hayes presented him with the June 2017 email, the one where Torrance admitted they'd never secured. An easement, Hayes, Mr. Torrance. Did Ridgeline Properties ever obtain a recorded easement for lake access before selling homes in Lakeview Estates? Torrance. No. Hayes. Did you disclose to buyers that no easement existed? Torrance. We believed access could be secured informally. Hayes. That's not what I asked. Did you disclose to buyers that you didn't own or control access to the lake? Torrance? Shifted in his seat. No. Hayes. Why not? Because it would have hurt sales. Hayes paused, letting the answer hang in the air. Then he slid another document across the table. An internal memo from Ridgeline's marketing department, dated May 2016. Hayes, do you recognize this memo? Torrance read it, his expression hardening. Yes. Hayes. This memo states, lake access adds $75,000 to $100,000 to home values. Emphasize this in all marketing materials. Do not mention that we don't actually own the lake or have a formal easement. Did you approve this memo? Torrance hesitated. I don't recall. Hayes, your signature is at the bottom. Torrance didn't respond. Hayes also hired a property appraiser to estimate the damages. It's caused by the HOA's trespassing. The appraiser's report was detailed and damning. Lost hunting lease income. $25,000 per year x 8 years equals $200. Lost potential ranch rental income. $15,000 per year x 8 years equals $120,000 reduced property value due to unauthorized structures and activity. $50. Survey and legal costs. $18. Total estimated damages. $388,000. Hayes reduced the claim to $95,000 for strategic reasons, focusing on the most easily provable losses, hunting leases, survey costs, legal fees, rather than speculative damages. But the point was made. The HOA's trespassing had cost me real money. By mid-November, Hayes had assembled a case file that was overwhelming. Emails proving the developer never secured an easement, emails proving Karen knew there was no agreement and instructed the board to lie depositions. Admitting the HOA assumed access without confirming ownership, marketing materials, falsely advertising. Lake access, an internal memo from Ridgeline admitting they lied to inflate home values financial. Records showing the HOA spent $380,000 on structures built without permission. Hayes called me. We're filing for summary judgment. This case is over. When's the hearing? January 14th, Judge William Torres. He's fair, experienced, and he doesn't tolerate property rights violations. What are our chances? 100%. They have no defense. The only question is how much they're going to pay. Karen Westfield had gambled that. I wouldn't fight. She'd gambled that I wouldn't find the emails. She'd gambled that the community pressure and media coverage would force me to settle. She'd lost. Every bet. Because the evidence was clear. The developer had lied, Karen had covered it up, and the HOA had spent 8 years trespassing on land they never had permission to use. The hearing was 6 weeks away, and Karen Westfield was about to lose everything. The hearing was scheduled for January 14th at 9 a.m. in the Cherokee County District Court before Judge William Torres. Hayes had briefed me on Torres over coffee the week before. He's been on the bench for 18 years. Former real estate attorney. He's fair, methodical, and he has zero tolerance for property rights violations. If you have a clear title and they're trespassing, he'll rule in your favor. No hesitation. What are our chances? Honestly, 100%. They have no case. The only question is damages. We arrived at the courthouse at 8:30. The building was a modest 2-story structure in the center of town. Red brick with white columns, surrounded by oak trees, the courtroom was already filling up. The left side was packed with Lakeview Estates residents, at least 60 of them, many wearing matching blue shirts that read, "Save Our Lake" in white letters. Karen Westfield sat at the defense table with David Brennan, flanked by 2 HOA board members. Michael Torrance, CEO of Ridgeline Properties, sat behind them with his own attorney. The right side had a handful of locals. A reporter from the county paper and Ed Hood, driven down to watch Todd Hayes, and I took our seats at the plaintiff's table. He set down his briefcase, pulled out a thick binder of evidence, and arranged it neatly in front of him. At exactly 9 a.m., the bailiff stood. All rise. The Honorable Judge William Torres presiding. Judge Torres entered a man in his late 50s, gray-haired, lean, wearing dark-rimmed glasses. He took his seat, opened the case file, and looked at both tables. This is Cassidy versus Lakeview Estates HOA and Ridgeline Properties. We're here on cross motions for summary judgment regarding alleged trespass and unauthorized use of private property. Mr. Brennan, you may begin. David Brennan stood and addressed the court with practiced confidence. Your Honor, this case involves a lake that has been shared between the Cassidy Ranch and the Lakeview Estates community for 8 years. The HOA and its residents have used the lake openly, continuously, and without objection. They've invested over $380,000 in infrastructure, docks, beaches, recreational facilities that have enhanced both the community and the property value of the adjacent ranch. Brennan walked to a display board showing photos of the docks and beaches. The plaintiff now claims this use was unauthorized. But the previous owner, William Cassidy, never objected. He was aware of the community. And he never once asked the HOA to stop. Brennan turned to face the judge. Under Texas law, adverse possession requires 10 years of continuous use. The HOA has 8 years. But courts recognize that when substantial good faith investments have been made, equity demands a different result. Debt. The plaintiff should not be allowed to unjustly enrich himself by seizing improvements the HOA built in good faith. He paused. We ask the court to deny the demand for removal and order reasonable compensation instead, through a recorded easement or payment for the encroached area. That would be fair, equitable, and serve the interests of justice. Brennan sat down. Judge Torres made a note. Mr. Hayes stood, calm and methodical. Your Honor, this case is not about equity or good faith. It's about property rights. Defendants built structures on my client's land without permission, without an easement, and without any legal basis. When confronted, they refused to remove the structures. And now they're asking this court to force Mr. Cassidy to accept their trespass because removal would be expensive. Hayes opened his binder. Let me address the facts. No easement exists, Hayes projected the first exhibit, the title search, showing the chain of ownership for the Cassidy Ranch from 1952 to present. This property has been in the Cassidy family for over 70 years. The title is clear. There are no easements. No recorded agreements. No encumbrances of any kind. He clicked to the next slide. the deed to Lakeview Estates, showing the boundary between the subdivision and the ranch. The boundary is defined and recorded. The lake is entirely on Mr. Cassidy's property. The defendants have no legal claim to. Its adverse possession does not apply. Hayes clicked to a slide showing Texas Property Code section 16.025. Texas law requires 10 years of continuous, open, notorious, and hostile use for adverse possession. The defendants have 8 years. They're 2 years short. There's no judicial discretion here. The statute is clear. He looked at the judge. They don't meet the statutory requirement. Adverse possession does not apply. Use was not open, and Notorious Hayes clicked to a timeline showing the dates of William Cassidy's illness and death. The defendants began using the lake in 2016, the same year. Mr. Cassidy suffered a stroke and was placed in assisted living. He was physically and mentally incapacitated. He couldn't object his property. He couldn't object. Hayes projected a photo of the ranch house, saculated, overgrown, clearly abandoned. The ranch house is located on the opposite side of the property, over a mile from the lake. Mr. Cassidy was not present to witness the trespass. The use was not open and notorious if the owner was unaware due to illness. Defendants acted in bad faith. Hayes clicked to the smoking gun email, though. June 2017 message from Michael Torrance to Karen Westfield. This is an email from the CEO of Ridgeline Properties to the HOA president. It states, "We never actually secured an easement from the old man. Just keep quiet and act like you own it." Hayes let the silence hang in the courtroom. The developer knew they had no easement, and they told the HOA to lie about it. He clicked to the next email. Karen's March 2019 message to the board. This is an email from Ms. Westfield instructing the HOA board to play dumb if the new owner asked questions about lake access. She knew there was no agreement. She told the board to cover it up. Hayes turned to face Karen. This was not good faith. This was fraud. Developer committed fraud. Hayes projected the internal Ridgeline memo, the one showing they deliberately marketed late access without disclosing they didn't own it. This memo, written by Ridgeline's marketing team and approved by Mr. Torrance, states, "Lake access adds $75,000 to $100,000 to home values. Do not mention that we don't actually own the lake or have a formal easement." Hayes looked at the judge. Ridgeline sold over 200 homes based on a lie. They told buyers they'd have lake access. They knew it wasn't true. That's fraud. Plaintiff has suffered damages. Hayes clicked to the property appraiser's report. Mr. Cassidy has lost income due to the trespass. He couldn't lease hunting rights. He couldn't rent the ranch. He's incurred legal fees and survey costs. Total damages, $95,000. Hayes closed the binder. The defendants built $380,000 worth of structures on someone else's land without permission. Now they're asking this court to let them keep those structures because removal is expensive. But that's their mistake, not Mr. Cassidy's. They chose to build without surveying. They chose to ignore property boundaries. And now they have to face the consequences. Judge Torres leaned forward and looked directly at Karen Westfield. "Ms. Westfield, I have a question for you." Karen stood glancing nervously at Brennan.
Yes, Your Honor.
"Did you ever ask William Cassidy, property owner, for permission before building docks on his land?" Karen hesitated. "He was elderly and in poor health." "That's not what I asked." "Did you ask him, yes or no?" "No, Your Honor." "Did you obtain a survey to confirm the property line before building?" "No." "Did you record an easement with the county?" Karen's voice dropped. "Oh, Your Honor." "You built $380,000 worth of structures on someone else's land without surveying, without asking permission, and without recording any legal right to be there. Is that correct?" "We were told by the developer that access was included." Judge Torres cut her off. "You were told. But you didn't verify. And now you're arguing that Mr. Cassidy should just accept your trespass because you've invested money in it?" Karen didn't respond. Judge Torres looked at Michael Torrance. "Mr. Torrance, did Ridgeline Properties ever secure an easement for lake access before selling homes in Lakeview Estates?" Torrance stood. "No, Your Honor. Did you disclose to buyers that you didn't own or control the lake? No. Why not? Torrance shifted uncomfortably. It would have impacted sales. Judge Torres removed his glasses and set them on the bench. So, you lied to maximize profit. Torrance didn't answer. Judge Torres took less than 10 minutes to deliver his ruling. The evidence is overwhelming. The title is clear. No easement exists. The defendants have been trespassing on plaintiff's property. For 8 years, he looked at Brennan. Adverse possession requires 10 years. Defendants have 8. The claim fails. He turned to Karen. Westfield, you built structures on land you didn't own without asking permission. You instructed your board to cover up the lack of an easement. You continued trespassing even after being asked to stop. That is not good faith. It is bad faith. He looked at Torrance. And Mr. Torrance, you sold homes based on false representations of lake access, knowing you had no legal right to provide it. That is fraud. The ruling, trespass, is clear and undisputed. All structures must be removed. Removal deadline, 120 days from today's date. The HOA must remove all docks, beaches, pathways, and recreational structures and restore the land to its original condition. Damages. The HOA shall pay plaintiff $95,000 for lost income, survey costs, and legal fees. Fraud damages. Ridgeline Properties shall pay plaintiff $250,000 in compensatory and punitive damages for fraudulent misrepresentation. No adverse possession or prescriptive rights exist. Judge. Torres leaned forward, his tone hardening. Miss Westfield, Mr. Torrance, you don't get to trespass for 8 years and then claim rights. The lake is his. The land is his. You built on property you don't own, and now you're paying to tear it down. He looked at both tables. The structures will be removed within 120 days, or I will hold the defendants in contempt. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Karen sat frozen at the defense table, her face pale. Torrance stood quickly and left the courtroom without looking at anyone. The Lakeview Estates residents sat in stunned silence. A few whispered to each other. One woman covered her face with her hands. Hayes leaned over to me. Total damages, HOA pays $95,000. Ridgeline pays $250,000. Ad removal costs probably $150,000 too. $200,000 in their legal fees. They're looking at $725,000 minimum. They spent $380,000 building it, I said. Correct. Over $1 million total for structures they have to tear down. As we left the courthouse, a reporter from the county paper approached me. Mr. Cassidy, how do you feel about the ruling? I feel like justice was served, I said. The lake is mine. It always was. Now everyone knows it. What about the families who've been using the lake? They were lied to. The developers sold them homes based on access they didn't own. That's not my fault. That's Ridgeline's fault. The reporter nodded and walked away. Ed caught up with me in the parking lot. That was brutal. Karen had every chance to fix this. I said she could have removed the structures when I first asked. Instead, she lied, rallied the community, and fought me in court. And now she's paying for it. I nodded, because Karen Westfield had gambled that I wouldn't sue, wouldn't find the emails, wouldn't win. She'd lost every bet. The docks were coming down. The HOA was paying $95,000. Ridgeline was paying $250,000. And Karen. She was about to face a recall vote because the residents of Lakeview Estates had just learned the truth. Their HOA president had lied to them, the developer had defrauded them, and the lake access they'd paid for. It never existed, the ruling made. The regional news that evening, the headline in the Tyler Morning Telegraph read, Judge orders HOA to remove $380,000 in structures built on private land, developer liable for fraud. The article was detailed and damning, quoting Judge Torres's ruling directly and highlighting the key evidence, the emails showing the developer never secured an easement, Karen's instructions to play dumb, and the internal Ridgeline memo, admitting they'd lied to inflate home values. Excerpt. District Judge William Torres ruled that the Lakeview Estates HOA must remove all docks, beaches, and recreational structures built on private land belonging to Alex Cassidy. The HOA must pay $95,000 in damages. Developer Ridgeline Properties must pay $250,000 for fraudulently selling homes. With false lake access claims, evidence presented at the hearing included emails showing Ridgeline CEO Michael Torrance admitted the company never actually secured an easement and instructed HOA President Karen Westfield to keep quiet and act like you own it. You don't get to trespass for 8 years and then claim rights, Judge Torres said. The lake is his. The land is his. You remove your structures or I'll hold you in contempt. The article included a quote from Hayes. This case should serve as a warning to developers and HOAs. You cannot build on land you don't own and expect the courts to let you keep it. Property rights are fundamental, and they will be enforced. Public opinion shifted overnight. The Lakeview Estates HOA Facebook group, which had been filled with anti-Cassidy posts for months, erupted with a very different tone. Post number 1, January 15th, 9:47 a.m. I just read the full court ruling. Karen. And Ridgeline LIED to us. He told us lake access was included. They never had an easement. They never asked permission. And now we're paying $95,000 to tear down docks we paid for because they committed fraud. The comments poured in. I paid $485,000 for this house specifically because of lake access. I was lied to. Karen told us the grandfather gave permission. That was a lie. She knew there was no agreement. Ridgeline added $75,000 to the price of my home for lake access they didn't own. That's fraud. I want my money back. The developer's internal memo literally says, "Don't mention we don't own the lake." How is that not criminal? Post number 2, January 15th, 1:22 p.m., Emergency HOA. Meeting tonight at 7 p.m. Karen needs to be removed. This is her fault. More replies. She knew. The emails prove it. She covered it up and dragged us into a lawsuit we couldn't win. We're paying $95,000 in damages because she refused to admit the truth. I feel betrayed. We trusted her. We rallied behind her, and she lied to us. Karen has to go. Tonight, the emergency HOA meeting was held on January 15th at 7 p.m. in the Lakeview Estates Clubhouse. Over 190 residents attended, the largest turnout in the community's history. Karen sat at the front table, alone. The 2 board members who'd flanked her at the hearing had resigned that afternoon. David Brennan was not present. The acting treasurer, a man named Daniel Ortiz, opened the meeting by reading the financial impact. The court has ordered us to pay $95,000 in damages to Mr. Cassidy. We're estimating $150,000 too. $200,000 for structure removal and land restoration. Add our legal fees approximately $80,000, and we're looking at a total cost of $325,000 to $375,000. He paused. We built the structures for $380,000, so we've spent roughly $700,000 on lake amenities we now have to tear down. The room erupted in angry murmurs. One resident stood. Karen, did you know we didn't have an easement? Karen's voice was strained. The developer assured us, that's not what I asked. Did you know there was no recorded easement when we built? The docks. Karen hesitated. I believed we had an informal agreement. You lied, the resident said, her voice sharp. The emails prove it. You knew, and you told the board to cover it up. Another resident stood, holding a printout of the Ridgeline memo. The developer's internal memo says, don't mention we don't actually own the lake. You worked with them. You knew they were lying to us, and you said nothing. Karen's face flushed. I was trying to protect the community's investment. You were trying to protect yourself? A third resident interrupted. And now we're paying $325,000 for your mistake. Daniel Ortiz called for order, then read the motion. Motion to remove Karen Westfield as HOA president, effective immediately. The motion was seconded. The vote was called .172 in favor. 14 opposed. Karen stood, grabbed her purse, and walked out of the clubhouse without another word. The new interim HOA president was a man named James Kellerman, a retired engineer who'd been on the architectural review committee and had opposed Karen's aggressive tactics from the beginning. 2 days after the meeting, I received an email from him. Subject, apology, and next steps, Mr. Cassidy. My name is James Kellerman. I've been elected interim president of the Lakeview Estates HOA following the court ruling and leadership change. On behalf of our community, I want to formally apologize. The previous leadership misled us. The developer defrauded us. And you were unfairly vilified for defending your property rights. We are moving forward with the court-ordered removal. All structures will be dismantled within the 120-day deadline, and the land will be restored to its original condition. We understand this has been a difficult process for you. We appreciate your patience. Sincerely, James Kellerman replied. Mr. Kellerman, thank you for the apology. I appreciate the acknowledgement and the change in leadership. I'll be available to coordinate access for the removal crew. Let me know when work is scheduled to begin. Alex Cassidy. The structure removal began on February 3rd and took 6 full weeks. Contractor crew arrived with flatbed trucks, cranes, and a barge. I drove out to the ranch twice a week to oversee the process and document the work. The crews started with the docks, 12 of them, ranging from 30 to 60 feet in length. They dismantled each one piece by piece, pulling the decking, removing the pilings, and hauling everything away on trucks. Next, they cleared the 3 swimming beaches, removing lounge chairs, fire pits, stone pathways, and landscaping. The sand was excavated and hauled off. The stone was broken apart and removed. The clubhouse deck took the longest. It was 800 square feet, built on concrete footings, with a covered roof, lighting, and picnic tables. The crew had to dismantle the roof first, then the decking. Then jackhammered the footings and removed the concrete. By mid-March, the lake was empty. The shoreline was bare. The only evidence of the HOA's presence was the scarred earth where structures had been raw soil, tire tracks, and empty post holes. The contractor spent another 2 weeks restoring the land, grading the soil, reseeding, with native grasses and planting young pine trees to replace the ones that had been cleared when they finished. I walked the shoreline with James Kellerman and the contractor foreman. The land wasn't perfect, but it was restored. The lake was. Mine again. James handed me a check for $95,000. The court awarded damages. We also paid Ridgeline's judgment, James said quietly. The $250,000. They couldn't afford it, so we covered it to avoid further delays. You paid their fraud judgment? We didn't have a choice. Ridgeline declared bankruptcy. The removal would have been delayed indefinitely. We paid it, and we're suing them for reimbursement. Good, I said. James looked out at the empty shoreline. For what it's worth, a lot of us didn't know. Karen and the developer lied to us. We thought the access was legitimate. I believe you. Over the next few weeks, several Lakeview Estates residents approached me individually, some at the ranch, some via email to apologize. One man stopped by while I was inspecting the restored shoreline. Mr. Cassidy, I'm Tom Brenner. I live in Lakeview Estates. I signed the petition against you. I posted angry comments online. I didn't know Karen and Ridgeline were lying. I'm sorry. I appreciate that, I said. You were right to fight. You had every right to your property. Should have demanded proof before attacking you. Another family, a couple with 2 kids, sent me an email. Mr. Cassidy, we were at the rally. We held Save Our Lake signs. We believed Karen when she said your grandfather gave us permission. We feel embarrassed now that we know the truth. You were defending your property, and we attacked you for it. We're sorry. I replied to each apology the same way. Thank you. I appreciate the acknowledgement. No hard feelings. In late March, I met with James Kellerman at a coffee shop in Tyler to discuss a proposal. Some of our residents have asked if there's any way to negotiate limited lake access, James said carefully. Not permanent, not free, but maybe a seasonal program, controlled, fee-based with clear rules. I'd been thinking about the same thing. The lake was huge, 2 miles long, surrounded by forest. I didn't need exclusive use of all of it. What are you proposing? A permit system. Residents apply for seasonal access Memorial Day to Labor Day. You set the rules. How many permits? What activities are allowed? What areas are off limits? We pay an annual fee, say $500 per household. All funds go to you for property management and liability insurance. And if someone violates the rules, their permit is revoked. No refund. I thought about it. It was reasonable, controlled, and it acknowledged that the lake was mine. It's me a draft agreement, I said. I'll review it. On April 10th, Ed called me. Karen's house just went up for sale. I pulled up the listing online. The photos showed her home, well-maintained, modern, professionally staged, listed at $520,000. The listing had been active for 1 day. Ed sent a follow-up text. Stay. Everyone knows she lied. She's done. Karen sold the house 5 weeks later and moved out of Lakeview Estates. I never saw her again. On April 18th, the regional news ran another story. Developer CEO resigns amid fraud investigation. Hit the article. Reported that Michael Torrance had stepped down as CEO of Ridgeline Properties. Following the court judgment and a criminal referral from the district attorney's office, the company was facing a class action lawsuit from Lakeview Estates homeowners demanding refunds for fraudulent lake access premiums. One homeowner interviewed for the story said, "We paid $75,000 extra for lake access that never existed. Ridgeline lied. They defrauded us. And we want our money back." In May, I hired a fencing contractor to install professional fencing along the entire boundary between the ranch and Lakeview Estates. 8-foot black steel fencing, clean and permanent. I also installed security cameras at key access points and replaced the old private property signs with large, professionally made signs that read, "Cassidy RANCH private property, no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted X's penal code." 30.05 The signs were visible from every angle. The boundary was clear. The lake was mine, and no one was going to trespass again. I stood at the edge of the lake one evening in late May, watching the sun set over the water. The docks were gone. The beaches were gone. The clubhouse deck was gone. The shoreline was quiet, natural. Restored Karen Westfield had thought 8 years of trespassing gave her rights. She'd thought community benefit justified ignoring property ownership. She'd thought I'd cave to public pressure, media coverage, and legal threats. She was wrong on every count, because the lake wasn't hers. The land wasn't hers, and no amount of rallies, petitions, or fraudulent claims was going to change that. Karen had paid $325,000 for her mistake. Ridgeline had paid $250,000 for their fraud, and both had lost everything: reputation, leadership, credibility. The lake was mine again, all 4,000 acres, and this time, everyone knew it. I stood at the edge of the lake on a warm evening in early June. Looking out over the water, the sun was setting behind the pine forest on the western shore, casting orange and gold light across the surface. The water was still undisturbed, reflecting the sky like a mirror. No boats, no jet skis, no floating platforms, no docks jutting into the water, no cleared beaches with lounge chairs and fire pits, no clubhouse deck with families gathered for cookouts, just the lake, my lake, quiet and untouched. The way my grandfather had known it for 70 years, I thought about Karen Westfield about the first time I'd met her. Confident and dismissive, telling me the lake access was an arrangement and that I should honor my grandfather's understanding. She'd called me greedy, said I was stealing their lake, said I was destroying families and tearing apart a community. She'd organized rallies with 300 people. She'd launched a media campaign painting me as a villain. She'd collected 500 signatures on a petition demanding I give up my property rights. She'd told the local news, "We've invested millions. He can't just take that away." But the lake was never theirs. My grandfather had owned it since 1952. He'd built the ranch house overlooking it. He'd worked that land for 70 years, and when he died, he left it to me, not to Karen, not to the HOA, not to the 200 families in Lakeview Estates, who'd been told by a developer that lake access was included. Karen had thought 8 years of trespassing created rights. She'd thought community benefit justified ignoring property ownership. She thought adverse possession would protect her. Even though Texas law required 10 years and she had 8, she'd thought the judge would side with the community, with the families, the children, investments over one man defending an empty piece of land. She was wrong on every count. The evidence had been overwhelming. The title search showed no easements, no agreements, no legal basis for the HOA's use of the lake. The emails showed the developer had never secured permission and had told Karen to keep quiet and act like you own it. Karen's own emails showed she knew. There was no agreement and had instructed the board to play dumb if I asked questions. The depositions showed my grandfather had never been contacted, never given permission, and had been too ill to object. When the trespassing began, and the internal ridgeline memo, the smoking gun showed, the developer had deliberately lied to buyers. Knowing lake access would add $75,000 to $100,000 to home values, Judge Torres had seen through it all in minutes. You don't get to trespass for 8 years and then claim rights, he'd said. The lake is his. The land is his. You remove your structures, or I'll hold you in contempt. The financial cost had been devastating. The HOA paid $95,000 in damage, lost income, legal fees, survey costs. They paid an additional $250,000 to cover Ridgeline's fraud judgment when the developer couldn't afford it. They spent $150,000 to $200,000 on structure removal and land restoration. Their legal fees totaled $80,000. Total cost to the HOA is over $575,000. Add the $380,000 they'd originally spent building the structures, and the total was over $955,000 nearly. $1 million for lake access they never legally had. Ridgeline Properties faced a class action lawsuit from homeowners demanding refunds for fraudulent lake access premiums. Michael Torrance, the CEO, had resigned amid a criminal fraud investigation. Karen Westfield had been removed as HOA president in a 172-14 vote. She'd sold her home and left the community in shame, and the residents of Lakeview Estates, the families who'd signed the petition, attended the rallies, and believed Karen's lies, had learned the truth the hard way. Their HOA president had lied to them, the developer had defrauded them, and the lake access they'd paid for had never existed. I walked along the restored shoreline, where the beaches had been cleared and the land reseeded. Young pine trees were starting to grow where the clubhouse deck had stood, native grasses covered. The areas where stone pathways had been laid, in a few years there would be no trace of the HOA's trespassing. The land would look the way it had before 2016, wild, natural, untouched. I stopped at the spot where the largest dock had been. 60-foot structure with a covered boat lift and jet ski platforms. The contractor had pulled every piling, filled every hole, and reseeded the area. Now it was just grass and dirt. Slowly healing, Karen had called me greedy. She'd said I was hoarding 4,000 acres. While families just wanted to enjoy a beautiful lake, she'd posted photos online with captions like, "One man versus an entire community." But this wasn't about greed. It was about ownership. My grandfather had spent 70 years working this land. He'd built the ranch. He'd managed the timber. He'd leased the hunting rights. And when he died, he left it to me, not because I deserved it more than anyone else, but because it was his to give. Karen Westfield didn't own the lake. The HOA didn't own the lake. Ridgeline Properties didn't own the lake. I owned the lake. And 8 years of trespassing didn't change that. I thought about the families in Lakeview Estates, the ones who'd approached me after the ruling to apologize, the ones who'd been lied to by their own leadership. Some of them had paid $75,000 extra for homes specifically because of exclusive lake access. They'd been defrauded, and they were victims in their own right, not of me, but of Karen and Ridgeline. That's why I'd agreed to James Kellerman's proposal for a limited seasonal access program, controlled, fee-based, with clear rules and boundaries. It wasn't a gift, it wasn't a compromise. It was a business arrangement that acknowledged what had always been true. The lake was mine, and access was a privilege I could grant or revoke at will. I stood at the water's edge, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky turning deep purple and orange. The lake stretched out in front of me 2 miles long, surrounded by forest. Untouched and silent, Karen Westfield had thought she could build $380,000 worth of structures on my land and I'd just accept it. She'd thought community pressure, media coverage, and public sympathy would force me to back down. She'd thought the judge would side with families over property rights. She was wrong, because property law is simple. It doesn't care about how much you spent. It doesn't care about how long you've been trespassing. It doesn't care about petitions, rallies, or news coverage. It cares about one thing. Who owns the land? And I owned the land. Karen built docks on property she didn't own without asking, without surveying, and without any legal right. When she was caught, she lied. She covered it up. She rallied a community against me. She hired an attorney and fought for months, and she lost. The docks were gone. The beaches were cleared. The HOA paid over $575,000. Ridgeline paid $250,000 and lost their CEO. Karen sold her home and left the community in disgrace. The lesson was clear. And Lakeview Estates had learned it the expensive way. Survey before you build, confirm before you assume. Respect property boundaries. Or pay the price to fix your mistake. Karen Westfield thought she could trespass on 4,000 acres and claim it. Was hers just because the owner was too old to stop her. Michael Torrance thought he could sell homes based on access he didn't own, and buyers would never find out. The HOA thought 8 years of open use gave them rights to someone else's property. They were all wrong. And now, every time the residents of Lakeview Estates looked at the lake, they could no longer access without my permission. They'd remember. You can't use land you don't own. You can't build on property without permission. And if you try, the judge will make you pay at your expense. I locked the gate, climbed into my truck, and drove back toward the ranch house. The lake was mine. The land was mine. And my grandfather's legacy, 70 years of hard work, careful stewardship, and fierce independence was protected. Karen had thought she could take it. She was wrong, because in the end, property law doesn't care how confident you are, how many people support you, or how much you've already spent. It only cares about the deed, and the deed was mine. Karen crossed the line, and she paid the price. $955,000, every dollar she gambled, every structure she built, every lie she told, all of it gone. Because you can't trespass on 4,000 acres and claim it's yours just because no one stopped you. Karen tried. The developer tried. They lost everything. And now, the boundary was clear, the fence was up, the signs were posted, and the lake, my lake, was quiet again, just the way my grandfather left it, just the way it would stay. Because this land was mine, and no one, not Karen, not the HOA, not 500 signatures on a petition was ever going to take it from me again.